She lived a life that felt almost invisible. Every day was a routine. It's the kind of routine that blended into the background so completely that most people didn't even notice her. She walked the same streets, took the same bus, and worked at the same small place that didn't seem to care about her one way or another. She had learned early on not to expect much from anyone, to avoid drawing attention, because attention often came with judgment or ridicule. People whispered behind her back, and sometimes to her face, thinking she wouldn't hear or couldn't understand. They didn't know she could hear everything and that she remembered it all. Her family didn't have much money. Her life wasn't filled with luxury or opportunity. What she had, she clung to with quiet determination. There was one thing that belonged solely to her, one thing that gave her a sense of freedom, a sense of power in a life that often felt powerless. That thing was music. She had discovered it when she was very young, almost by accident. A neighbor had a piano, and the first time she touched the keys, something deep inside her shifted. It was as if the world became clearer, as if all the noise around her fell away. Leaving only the sound she created with her own hands, music became her refuge. She would spend hours playing in secret, sometimes late at night when the rest of the house was asleep. Her fingers learned the keys in a way that felt natural, almost as if they had a memory of their own. She wasn't trained in the formal sense. She didn't go to lessons or competitions. She had books she borrowed from the library, and hours of listening to recordings of musicians who could make the piano speak like a living thing. She learned by watching, by copying, by feeling the music in her bones. Her talent grew quietly, invisibly, until it was a part of her. At work, she was quiet and careful. Her coworkers didn't know about her music. They saw her as polite but timid, someone who would never speak up in a meeting, who would never volunteer for anything that required risk or attention. Sometimes they teased her gently, other times more harshly. "She's so soft," they would say. "I don't even think she'd fight back if someone tried to take her lunch." She had grown used to it. She learned how to smile when they laughed, how to nod when they joked, how to move through the day without making waves. Inside, she felt the sting of their words, but she never let it show. She had music to protect her, a secret world that was hers alone. Her apartment was small and plain, but she had made it cozy in her own way. There was a corner where the light from the window fell just right, and in that corner sat a small keyboard she had saved up for. It wasn't grand, but it had the keys she needed, the sound she loved. She spent hours there, her hands flying over the keys, her eyes closed, lost in the music. Sometimes she would play so long that her fingers ached and her heart ached too, but it was worth it. In those moments, she felt alive in a way nothing else could give her. She didn't have many friends. People often found her quietness intimidating or boring. She had learned not to take it personally, though. Most of the time, it was better to keep people at a distance. She had one or two people she trusted, but even with them, she never spoke much about her music. It was too personal, too sacred. She knew that if the wrong person found out, they might mock her, might try to tear her down before she had a chance to shine. One evening, she was walking home from work, the streets empty except for the occasional car passing by. The sky was dark, the kind of dark that felt heavy and cold. She hugged her coat tighter around herself, thinking about the day that had passed, thinking about the quiet moments she would soon spend at her keyboard. She walked slowly, savoring the calm, the solitude. There was a rhythm to her steps, a rhythm that matched the rhythm in her mind, the rhythm that lived in her fingers. Her life felt small, limited, but she didn't mind. She had learned to find beauty in the little things, the way the sun fell on a building in the morning, at the sound of rain against the window, the gentle hum of the city at night. And she had her music. That was enough. At least, she told herself it was enough. Sometimes, though, doubt crept in. Sometimes she wondered if she would ever have a chance to show the world what she could really do. Would anyone ever hear her music the way she heard it? Would anyone ever understand the hours of practice, the sweat, the tears, the endless nights spent in solitude just trying to get a note right? It was a scary thought, but she pushed it away. There was no point in worrying about the future. For now, she had the present, and the present was music. At work, She moved through her tasks with quiet efficiency. She noticed everything, though she rarely spoke. She noticed the way some people laughed at others, the way they whispered about things that weren't their business. She noticed the kindness in small gestures too. The way someone held a door open without a word, or the way someone smiled at a stranger. The world was complicated, sometimes cruel, sometimes beautiful. And she was learning how to navigate it without losing herself. Her coworkers continued to underestimate her. They didn't see the intensity in her eyes when she listened to music, the way her hands could move with such precision and emotion. They didn't see the fire that burned quietly inside her, the determination to be something more than what the world expected. To them, she was just another face, another voice, another person passing through the day. But she knew differently. She knew what she could do, even if no one else did. One day, a coworker left a stack of papers on her desk, joking about how she would probably mess them up. She smiled politely and began her work, careful to do everything correctly, as always. Inside, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She was used to proving herself in silence. She didn't need an audience. She didn't need applause. She only needed to know that she could do it. When she finally returned home that evening, she sank into her small chair at the keyboard. Her fingers danced across the keys, flowing over melodies she had created in her head. The music poured out of her like water from a hidden spring, pure and unstoppable. For hours, she lost herself in it. The outside world disappeared, leaving only the sound, the feeling, the beauty she had nurtured in secret. Sometimes, she would stop mid-song and listen to the notes hang in the air, feeling their weight and power. She thought about what it would be like to play for others, to see the faces of people moved by something she had created. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Could she ever step out of the shadows? Could she ever show the world what she had kept hidden all these years? But for now, she didn't have to answer those questions. For now, she could play. For now, the music was hers, and hers alone. The quiet, invisible girl who everyone thought they knew was not so quiet after all. In the dark of her small apartment, with her hands on the keys, she was alive, fierce, and completely herself. The world had no idea what was coming, and that was just fine. She didn't need anyone to see her yet. She only needed the music, and that was more than enough. A few weeks passed, and life continued in its quiet, predictable way. She spent her days working, her evenings playing music, and the world outside remained largely unaware of her hidden talent. That was until an unexpected opportunity appeared. One that seemed to come out of nowhere and yet carried an undercurrent of tension. It was an invitation to play at a small event organized by people from her workplace. The event wasn't a formal competition or a prestigious gathering. It was more like a casual talent showcase, something they described as fun. But the way it was presented made it clear they didn't really expect her to succeed. At first she hesitated. She had never performed for anyone outside of her few trusted friends, and even they had only heard her play in private. The thought of facing a room full of coworkers, people who often laughed at her behind her back, was intimidating. Her stomach tightened at the idea of being watched, judged, possibly mocked. Still, something inside her stirred a mix of curiosity and quiet defiance. She had spent years perfecting her music in secret, and maybe it was time to see what could happen if she stepped out of the shadows. When she arrived at the event, the room buzzed with laughter and chatter. People were mingling, sipping drinks, and casually glancing at each other with smirks. She could feel the energy of the room, a mix of excitement and mockery. The organizers called out names, introducing each person who would perform. When her name was mentioned, a few people chuckled, and she could sense the doubt hanging in the air. They had set her up in a way that made failure seem almost inevitable, as if they were eager to watch her stumble. Her hands felt cold as she approached the piano. She could hear the whispers, the jokes, the subtle comments that floated through the room like smoke. Some people expected her to make mistakes, to fumble through a song, to reveal herself as the timid, ordinary person they assumed she was. Her heart pounded, but she tried to focus on the music, on the notes she had practiced countless times. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining herself in her small apartment, playing alone, safe, and confident, The first few seconds felt like an eternity. She placed her fingers on the keys and took a deep breath. She remembered every lesson she had learned from the quiet hours spent alone, every melody she had nurtured in secret. The room seemed to grow louder around her, the murmurs and laughter filling the space, but she tuned it all out. She only focused on the music inside her. Then she played the first note. It was soft, deliberate, and filled with emotion. Immediately, something shifted. The chatter stopped. The laughter faded. The room went silent in a way that was almost shocking. People turned their heads, uncertain, drawn in by the sound that seemed impossibly beautiful coming from someone they had dismissed. It was not just a note, it was a statement, a revelation, a quiet declaration that she was not who they thought she was, as she continued to play. The music grew stronger, more confident. Each note carried the weight of years of practice, of frustration, of longing. Her fingers moved over the keys with precision and grace, as if they had a life of their own. The melodies were full of emotion, joy, sadness, hope, and triumph, all intertwined in a way that was mesmerizing. People in the room shifted in their seats, their expressions changing from amusement to disbelief to awe. No one had expected this. No one had imagined that she could make the piano speak with such clarity and power. A few people tried to hide their surprise, to glance away or whisper to their neighbors, but it was impossible to ignore. Her music filled the space, commanding attention without demanding it. It was a force that could not be contained or dismissed. She felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration, knowing that all eyes were on her, but also feeling the truth of her talent shining through. The very people who had set her up to fail were now witnessing something extraordinary. She did not falter. She had prepared for this moment in ways they could never understand. She had spent years perfecting each note, each chord, each pause, and now it all came together effortlessly. The music was not just sound. It was a story, a journey that spoke to everyone in the room in a language they had never heard before. They could feel it in their hearts, in the tension of their muscles, the quiet awe that replaced their laughter. By the time she finished, the room was completely silent. For a few moments, no one moved. The sound of her last note lingered in the air, heavy and profound. Then, slowly, people began to clap. It started softly, almost tentatively, as if they were unsure how to react. But then the claps grew louder, more genuine, filled with admiration and wonder. She had done what no one expected. She had turned their doubt into recognition, or mockery into respect. Some people looked embarrassed, realizing how wrong they had been to underestimate her. Others seemed inspired, as if seeing her talent had opened their eyes to something they had never considered. She herself felt a mixture of relief, pride, and something deeper, an understanding that she was capable of more than she had ever dared to imagine. This was more than a performance. It was a turning point, a moment that would change the way she saw herself and the way the world saw her after the event. People approached her with newfound respect. Some apologized for their previous dismissiveness, while others simply wanted to talk about the music. To understand how someone could play with such passion and skill, she smiled politely, grateful for the recognition but also quietly aware that this was only the beginning. She had shown them a glimpse of her true self, but there was still so much more inside her. Waiting to be discovered, walking home that night, she felt lighter than she had in years. The city seemed different somehow, less intimidating, more alive. She realized that stepping into the spotlight, even in a room full of doubters, had changed something inside her. The fear that had always held her back was still there, but it had lost its power. She had faced it, and she had triumphed, if only for a few minutes. The music had carried her through, and in that moment, she understood that she could trust herself, trust her talent, and trust the quiet strength that had always been a part of her. She thought about the people who had set her up, the whispers, the smirks, the expectations of failure, and she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had not only met their challenge, but had exceeded it in ways they could never have imagined. Their attempt to put her down had only revealed her true power, a power that had been hidden, waiting for the right moment to shine. That night, she returned to her small apartment and sat at her keyboard. She played again, Not for an audience this time, but for herself. The music flowed freely, without restraint, without fear. She knew that the world had seen a glimpse of her, but she also knew that the journey had just begun. There was more to learn, more to create, more to share. And for the first time, she felt ready for whatever came next. Confident that she could face it, not as the quiet, overlooked person everyone thought she was, but as someone who had discovered her own voice and refused to let it be silenced. The moment her fingers touched the keys, something shifted in the room. The sound of the first note hung in the air, clear, strong, and impossibly beautiful. It was not just a note. It was an announcement. The room, which had been buzzing with whispers, jokes, and quiet doubt, froze. People stopped moving. Their conversations died mid-sentence. Even the faint clinking of glasses seemed to vanish. Everyone felt it, though no one had expected to. The music carried with it a presence, a quiet authority, as if it was not coming from her hands, but from somewhere far larger than the small room. Somewhere that demanded attention. Her heart raced. Not with fear this time, but with a mix of excitement and disbelief. She could feel the energy of the room shift around her. She had played alone for years in the privacy of her apartment, in the darkness of her bedroom, where only the walls and the furniture were witnesses to her talent. But now, to hear the same music echoing through the room felt almost unreal. The people who had set her up to fail were watching her with wide eyes, their smirks gone, replaced by a kind of stunned silence. At first, she worried that they would still laugh, that someone would break the spell with a joke or a sarcastic comment. But they did not. Their attention was held, completely, by what she was creating with her hands. She felt a surge of confidence she had never known. Every note, every chord, every pause carried meaning, and she let herself sink into it. The music was no longer just practice. It was expression, emotion, and revelation, all at once. She played on, letting the melodies flow naturally. She could feel her body moving in rhythm with the sound, her fingers dancing over the keys, almost without conscious thought. Years of quiet practice, of long nights spent alone, of copying and learning from recordings and books, all converged into this moment. The room was captivated. Even the skeptics could not deny the beauty and power of what they were hearing. Some people had their arms crossed, unsure how to react. Others leaned forward, their faces softening, as if the music was touching something inside them that they had forgotten existed. A few had tears in their eyes, barely realizing it. The music was intimate, but it was also bold. It was not shouting for attention. It simply demanded acknowledgement. It told a story without words, a story that resonated deeply and immediately. Her mind wandered briefly, recalling all the times she had doubted herself. All the times she had stayed silent, hidden, believing that the world would never see her. And yet, here she was, playing in front of people who had underestimated her. And the sound of her music had made them stop, listen, and feel. She realized then that talent was not about being loud or aggressive. Talent was about truth. Talent was about sharing something real, something from deep inside, and letting it speak for itself. A low murmur spread through the audience as her fingers moved faster, more assuredly. People exchanged glances, silently acknowledging what was happening. It was rare to witness something so unguarded, so genuine. The notes were not just beautiful. They were precise, technically perfect, and yet full of emotion. It was a combination that made the music almost tangible, as if it could wrap around the listeners, touch them, change them. She noticed a few people in the back who had been the most dismissive, the ones who had set her up with the intention of seeing her fail. Their expressions shifted in real time, from doubt to shock to admiration. Some could not hide the embarrassment, quickly turning their heads or fidgeting with their hands. Others could not look away, mesmerized by the sound they had never imagined could come from someone they had underestimated. The music swelled and softened, rising and falling like the tide. She could feel the room responding, as if it were part of the performance. The silence between notes was just as important as the notes themselves, each pause drawing the listeners in deeper. Every person in the room felt the weight and meaning of what she was creating. She realized that her music had power beyond anything she had imagined. It was not just a skill. It was a voice, a statement, and it was finally being heard. When she glanced up briefly, she could see faces transformed. The laughter and whispers had vanished, replaced by awe and respect. She had not only captivated them, she had commanded their attention. People were sitting taller, leaning forward, holding their breath, as if not wanting to disturb the delicate spell that her music had cast. It was not arrogance or pride that she felt. It was the deep satisfaction of being understood, of being seen for what she truly was. As she played the final notes, she poured every ounce of feeling she had into them. The last chord lingered, reverberating through the room, refusing to fade immediately. There was a moment of pure silence after the sound stopped, a moment where no one dared to move, as if the world itself had paused to recognize what had just happened. And then slowly, the applause began. It was hesitant at first, a few claps here and there, but it grew steadily into a thunderous, heartfelt response. The room erupted, people on their feet, some cheering, some wiping away tears, all acknowledging the remarkable performance. She sat at the piano, breathing heavily, but feeling lighter than ever. The fear that had gripped her before stepping onto the stage had evaporated, replaced by a quiet pride and an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She had faced the challenge set by those who doubted her and had turned it into something extraordinary. The music she had nurtured in secret had spoken louder than any words could. People came forward, shaking her hand, complimenting her, asking how she had learned to play so beautifully. She answered politely, grateful for the recognition, but still humble. She understood that the real reward was not in their applause, but in the realization that she could trust herself, that she had strength, talent, and resilience she had never given herself credit for. Even after the event ended, she felt the change within herself. She had stepped into a space that had been filled with doubt and negativity, and she had transformed it with her music. She realized that the opinions of others could not define her, that her value was not determined by their expectations. She had proven, most importantly to herself, that she was capable of greatness, even when no one believed it. Walking home that night, the city felt different, brighter, alive with possibility. Every sound of the streets, the hum of traffic, the faint chatter from distant windows, seemed to carry a new meaning. She felt connected to the world in a way she had never experienced before. Aware that her music was not just a personal escape, but a bridge between herself and others. She had discovered a power she had kept hidden for too long. And now, it was hers to wield openly for the first time. She imagined a future where she could share her music with more than just the walls of her apartment. She imagined opportunities, experiences, and people who would listen, who would feel what she felt. And she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she had already faced the first one and had triumphed. The room that had been set up to mock her had instead witnessed something beautiful, something authentic, something undeniable. That night, as she returned to her small apartment, she sat once more at her keyboard. The echoes of the performance lingered in her mind, filling her with warmth and inspiration. She played again, softly, letting the melodies flow freely, without fear or expectation. The music was hers, always had been, but now it was also hers in a new way, a testament to her courage, her talent, and her refusal to be underestimated. The journey was far from over, but she had taken the first step, and she knew that nothing could ever take away the power she had discovered within herself as the final notes lingered in the air. The room remained silent for a moment longer than expected. No one spoke, no one moved, and it felt as though time itself had stopped. Every eye was fixed on her, a young woman who had once seemed quiet, timid and unremarkable, yet now held a room captive with her music. The shift was undeniable. Where there had been doubt and mockery, there was now awe and respect. The people who had set her up, the ones who had expected her to fail, sat frozen. Their faces told the story of realization and embarrassment. They had underestimated her, thought she was just another quiet person who would crumble under pressure. They had prepared for laughter and ridicule, but instead, today, they were faced with a display of talent and courage that left them speechless. Some of them looked away, unable to meet her gaze, while others stared, wide-eyed, as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. She sat there for a moment, catching her breath, feeling the adrenaline slowly fade. The applause began tentatively, a few claps from the front, hesitant, almost uncertain. But then it grew, spreading through the room, louder, stronger, and more heartfelt. People were on their feet, cheering, some with tears in their eyes, some smiling broadly, all showing their admiration and respect. It was not just polite applause, it was genuine, born from the recognition that they had witnessed something extraordinary. She had played from the depths of herself, revealing years of hidden effort, dedication, and passion. Every hour spent practicing in secret, every tear shed over a note she couldn't master. Every night of quiet solitude had led to this moment. The music was more than sound. It was a story of perseverance and truth. The truth was clear. She was not weak, timid, or ordinary. She was remarkable, and the world had finally seen it, as the audience processed what had happened. Whispers began to circulate, but these were not the whispers of ridicule. They were whispers of admiration. "I can't believe she did that," one person said softly. "She's amazing," another replied, almost in awe. The conversation shifted from doubt to respect, from mockery to curiosity. People wanted to know more about her, to understand how someone so quiet could hold such talent and presence. Some individuals approached her cautiously, unsure of how to behave after being proven wrong. A few apologized, admitting that they had misjudged her, that they had doubted her abilities. She accepted their apologies with grace, a quiet smile and a nod. Knowing that her actions had spoken louder than any words could, there was no need for bitterness or resentment. The performance had already made the point clear. Her music had done more than just entertain. It had revealed the truth about her character and ability. A few colleagues who had always seen her as ordinary began to treat her differently. They were still cautious, still processing the fact that the person they had overlooked was capable of something so extraordinary. Their demeanor changed, their respect evident in the way they interacted with her, the way they listened when she spoke, the way they sought her opinion on matters they had once dismissed. It was as if the music had rewritten the narrative, not just in their minds, but in the way they related to her as a person. She realized then that respect could be earned in ways other than confrontation or argument. It could be earned through authenticity, through sharing one's true self with courage and vulnerability. The music had been her medium, her voice, her way of communicating something that words could never capture. She had let the room see her in the most honest way possible, and the result was undeniable. They could not ignore her, could not dismiss her, could not belittle the truth she had revealed. Her confidence grew as she observed the reactions around her. She had always been careful not to draw attention, careful not to invite ridicule, careful not to fail. But now, having faced the challenge head-on, she understood the power of embracing one's own strength. The fear that had once constrained her no longer held the same weight. She had proven to herself that she could rise above expectations, above doubt, above the negativity of others. The music had been the catalyst. The courage to play had been hers. People lingered after the applause, asking questions, praising her technique, commenting on the emotion she conveyed through the piano. She responded with humility, grateful for their interest, but also quietly aware that the performance had been for herself as much as for anyone else. It had been a moment of personal triumph, a declaration that she was more than the quiet figure everyone thought they knew. She had faced a room full of doubters and had transformed their perception with authenticity and talent. Some who had tried to set her up with the intention of seeing her fail now found themselves learning an unexpected lesson. They had wanted to mock her, to see her stumble, but instead they witnessed courage, talent, and the quiet power of determination. It was a reminder that underestimating someone could have consequences beyond expectation. They had tried to define her by their limited perception, but she had redefined herself with a single act of bravery. Walking home later that night, she felt a sense of liberation. The city felt different somehow, as if the air itself was filled with possibility. She reflected on the day, on the performance, on the faces of those who had watched her. The experience had changed something fundamental inside her. She understood that her music was not just a hobby or a private escape. It was a part of who she was, a part that could reach others, move them, and reveal truths about herself and the world around her. Back in her small apartment, she sat at her keyboard once more. The keys felt familiar under her fingers, comforting and empowering. She played again softly, allowing the notes to flow without hesitation, without fear, without expectation. The music was hers, but it was also hers in a new way, shared, acknowledged, and respected. The performance had proven that the world could see her for who she truly was, and she had the courage to continue revealing that self in the days that followed. She noticed a subtle but meaningful shift in her interactions. People approached her with a newfound respect. Colleagues listened when she spoke, and even casual acquaintances seemed more attentive. She had stepped out of the shadows and, in doing so, changed the way the world saw her. But perhaps more importantly, she had changed the way she saw herself. She realized that self-belief was not contingent on the approval of others, but on the courage to act authentically, to embrace one's own abilities, and to reveal the truth of one's inner strength. The experience had been transformative. It was not just the applause, not just the admiration, not just the recognition of talent, but the deep understanding that she could face challenges, even when set up to fail, and emerge stronger. The music had been the vehicle, but the triumph belonged to her, the quiet, determined, and incredibly talented young woman who had finally shown the world what she was capable of. She knew now that this was only the beginning of a journey, one where her talent, her courage, and her determination would continue to guide her toward a future she had once only dreamed of. After that night, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. It wasn't as if everything became perfect or that opportunities suddenly fell into her lap, but there was a subtle shift, a ripple effect that touched every part of her daily existence. People who had once overlooked her now treated her with a quiet respect. Colleagues approached her with curiosity and appreciation, and even casual acquaintances seemed to notice a new confidence in her. It was as if the world had finally taken a small step toward seeing her the way she had always known she was. She continued to play her music in her apartment, but the music now had a new purpose. It was no longer just a private sanctuary. It had become a bridge to the outside world. She began to consider sharing her talent beyond the walls of her home, contemplating small performances and gatherings where her music could reach more people. The idea both excited and terrified her. She was still the same person who had feared judgment and ridicule, but she had discovered a courage she hadn't known existed. She realized that taking that first step into visibility had changed her perspective forever. The first time she played for a larger group outside her workplace, she felt the same flutter of nerves, the same apprehension. But the memory of the room falling silent at her first note gave her strength. She remembered the way she had captured the attention of those who doubted her, and she drew on that experience. The music flowed naturally, each note carrying emotion, each chord telling a story. The audience was captivated just as they had been before, and she felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her talent was not a fleeting moment, but a true reflection of her skill and passion. As weeks passed, invitations began to come, small at first, and then more frequent. Local gatherings, community events, and even a few opportunities to play for charities allowed her to showcase her music. She remained humble, never losing sight of the fact that her journey had begun in quiet solitude. The applause, praise, and recognition were gratifying, but they were secondary to the joy and fulfillment she found in playing. She realized that while acknowledgement was valuable, the true reward lay in the connection she created through her music. Her confidence grew with every performance. She began to see herself not as a quiet, overlooked individual, but as someone capable of inspiring others. The timid girl who had once walked through life unseen had discovered her voice and learned to use it. She carried herself differently, not arrogantly, but with a subtle strength and self-assurance that came from knowing her own worth. People noticed the change and inspired a newfound respect in those around her. Her relationships with coworkers improved as well. Those who had once doubted her now treated her with courtesy and admiration. They listened when she spoke, sought her advice, and occasionally shared their own experiences, hoping to learn from her dedication and focus. It was a subtle shift, but it was meaningful. She realized that true influence was not about dominating others, but about demonstrating integrity, skill, and perseverance. Her actions had spoken louder than words ever could. At home, she continued her late-night sessions at the keyboard, exploring new melodies, experimenting with different styles, and pushing the boundaries of her skill. She recorded some of her compositions, sharing them with a small audience online, and received encouraging feedback. The world that had once seemed distant and intimidating now appeared more accessible, more welcoming. She had discovered that her music had the power to move people, to bring comfort, joy, and reflection. It was a realization that both humbled and empowered her. She also discovered a sense of balance she had never known before. She managed her work, her practice, and her growing presence in the local music community without feeling overwhelmed. The key was focus, dedication, and an understanding of her own limits. She learned to protect her personal space and her creative energy, ensuring that each note she played was infused with authenticity and emotion. The discipline she had cultivated in secret now served her well in public, allowing her to navigate challenges with grace and poise. One day, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the people who had doubted her, the challenges she had faced, and the private hours of practice that had shaped her skill. She realized that every moment of adversity had contributed to her growth. Each obstacle had strengthened her resilience, and every quiet, unseen effort had prepared her for the moment when her talent could no longer be hidden. The realization was profound. Her struggles had not been setbacks, but stepping stones. The recognition she received also brought unexpected inspiration. She met other musicians, some older and more experienced, who shared their own stories of hardship, dedication, and triumph. She learned from them, collaborated with them, and allowed their experiences to inform her own journey. Each interaction reinforced the importance of persistence, humility, and continuous growth. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It had to be nurtured, shared, and refined over time. Her music began to reflect her evolution, incorporating richer textures, more complex harmonies, and deeper emotional expression. She wrote pieces that told stories of struggle and triumph, of quiet courage and unexpected strength. Listeners connected with these compositions, some reaching out to share how her music had touched them, inspired them, or provided solace during difficult times. She felt a profound sense of purpose, realizing that her talent could have a meaningful impact beyond her own satisfaction. Despite all the changes, she remained grounded. She remembered the quiet girl who had sat alone in her apartment, practicing in secret, feeling invisible to the world. She honored that version of herself, knowing that the humility, discipline, and introspection that had developed during those years were what made her music so authentic and moving. The contrast between her private self and her public recognition reinforced the lesson that true talent and character often flourish in silence before being revealed to the world. Over time, she embraced new opportunities to teach and mentor others who were beginning their own journeys in music. She found joy in guiding young or overlooked talents, sharing the lessons she had learned about perseverance, focus, and self-belief. Helping others discover their own voices became a natural extension of her own growth, allowing her to create a legacy beyond performance. Each student's success reminded her of her own path, reinforcing the importance of patience, practice, courage. Life continued to evolve, and she navigated it with confidence and grace. The initial moment when her first note silenced a room remained a pivotal memory, a reminder of what was possible when courage met preparation. She no longer feared judgment or failure. Instead, she embraced challenges as opportunities to grow and to reveal the depth of her talent. She had discovered that true strength lay not in avoiding difficulty, but in facing it with integrity, passion, and authenticity. Looking forward, she saw endless possibilities. Invitations to perform at larger events, collaborations with other musicians, and opportunities to compose for various projects filled her calendar. She approached each new endeavor with the same careful preparation and heartfelt dedication that had defined her early practice sessions. And yet she never lost sight of the joy that had first drawn her to music, the simple, profound pleasure of creating sound, of shaping emotion, and of connecting with others through a language that transcended words. The journey she had taken was a testament to resilience, talent, and the quiet power of determination. She had been set up to fail, underestimated by those around her, and yet she had risen above expectation, revealing a hidden strength and a profound gift. Her story became a source of inspiration, showing that those who are overlooked or doubted often possess the greatest potential. She had discovered her voice, embraced it, and shared it with the world, transforming not only her own life, but also the lives of those who listened. In the end, she realized that the applause, recognition, and admiration were rewarding, but the true fulfillment came from the journey itself, the countless hours of practice, the perseverance through doubt and fear, the courage to step into the unknown, and the ability to transform challenge into triumph. She had become not only a musician, but a symbol of what is possible when talent is nurtured with dedication and revealed with courage. Her life had changed not because the world had made space for her, but because she had made space for herself, and in doing so, she had created a legacy that would continue to resonate long after the last note had faded.